Hello, Black Swamp Podcast listeners. Tim here again, and thanks for tuning into episode 31 with Elizabeth DeLamater in our series of BSP educator and artist interviews. If you've been listening regularly, thank you, and hopefully you've enjoyed dropping in on these conversations. If you're new to our series, thanks also, and feel free to travel back in time through our episodes. We've had a lot of great conversations about practicing, improvising, being an entrepreneur, and other fun percussive topics. One quick note before getting into our next conversation. We're running a special snare drum sale through the end of March. Basically, we have a collection of snare drums that are available to ship quickly. So if you're shopping for a snare drum in a hurry or just looking for something special, check out the quick ship snare drums we have on our website. You can visit our homepage or follow the link in the show notes. Plus, you can receive a 10% discount when purchasing through participating retailers. So get a super sweet orchestral snare drum fast and save money at the same time. What's not to love there? So Elizabeth DeLamater is a BSP educator who has taught, performed, and lectured around the world, most recently in Trinidad right at the beginning of the pandemic. I think it was like 2019, late 2019. Which we spend some time talking about. Elizabeth also has her own podcast called Art Lives or Lives. I've landed on Lives, so Art Lives. She's also a steel band authority and is chair of the PAS Diversity Alliance, which I learn all more about during our conversation. Again, we'll have info and links in our show notes for a bunch of our activities. Otherwise, let's get chatting. Welcome, Elizabeth, to the Black Swamp Podcast, and thanks for taking the time to talk with me. And if you could, we sort of have a little agenda, I guess, but sometimes I like to just get an idea of how our artists and educators got started in the music and percussion business. So, you know, however much detail you want to share or not is totally cool, but like kind of how you got started playing percussion, what some influences or inspirations were, or kind of a little bit of your backstory, I guess.
Oh boy. Well, I loved music. I don't remember when I didn't. So I guess I was bugging my mother to let me play some instruments right away, and she let me start taking piano lessons early, and then I was just always fascinated by drums.
Yeah.
They were my favorite looking instruments. I loved all the sounds, and they were my favorite ones to learn about. And I remember loving to see and hear the timpani in all of those, cartoons and Fantasia. And if we ever went to a concert, was fascinated by the drums. They were just the most coolest, but I loved them so much. I thought there was no way my parents would let me play them. It's not
it would be too good to be true or something, right? If you got to experience it.
Yeah. And so I think I actually studied for the rhythm test at school or something. A teacher had said, "Oh, you play the piano. Well, if you do really well on the rhythm test, maybe you'll be assigned percussion." And I thought, that's just, would be the bee's knees or whatever I thought
right.
back then.
The heavens opened up and
right.
All your dreams were about to come true.
Well, it turns out that my mother only said yes because she'd already paid for a cello and then a saxophone for my brother.
Okay.
And a neighbor had told her that it had only been $5 to pay for her son's drumsticks. So when I said,
that's all you need is a pair of drumsticks and a kitchen counter or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. My mom was like, "Oh my gosh, this kid already wanted a piano. Yeah, sure, you could play drums."
Yeah.
And I was, that was it. So
yeah, it's funny, one of my running jokes from the college years even was like, "Oh, I should have played the flute,"
Yep.
like the quantity of instruments, and then full well schlepping gear and tearing down and setting up. And so the other day at the dinner table, my oldest plays violin, like this is our third year, and our youngest was
Nice.
like, she's like, if I ever picked up an instrument, I might like to play the flute. And I was like, yes, run with that. So we roll, keep going. I like the way you're thinking. I like the direction you're going. But
You could
yeah,
put it in a backpack.
yeah, totally.
It's crazy to
Yeah.
me.
And we were like, even though, yeah, the piccolo, once you learn to play the flute, then you could get an even smaller instrument and you could play the piccolo. Uh, yeah, my another running joke in my family is we kind of have kind of longer arms. And when I was like in fifth grade, the band director, when we were doing the tests, like
Yeah.
he wanted me to play trombone because I had long arms. And I was like,
Oh.
uh,
Mm,
no thanks. I'd like to play the drums, thank you. So yeah.
totally.
um so you were just like interested in music at a young age and knew you wanted to play drums and percussion, and then kind of hit it. uh get it. You hit it.
Nice.
Thanks. And kind of got into it in uh grade school, middle school type stuff, and went from there.
Yeah, I because I did know piano, I did know already the notes on the bells, right? So I was ahead of my buddies in school. So the band director said, "Hey, maybe you want to take lessons with this local teacher." And the local teacher turned out to be really spectacular. So um, her name is Vicki Jenks, and she is somebody who had a huge studio in Madison, also taught at the Wisconsin Youth Symphony Orchestra. Um, so from sixth grade on, I saw somebody who had a career in music, in percussion,
Mm-hmm.
and I also saw a woman who was doing it
Right.
and was taken seriously. So also after that awesome sixth grade band director, I had band directors who didn't think women should be playing, but
Ugh.
luckily I had a private teacher who did. And so once I saw that it could be done, and that she had a lot of neat experiences and got to travel everywhere, then I was pretty hooked. And I played with the youth symphony for many years, and because I was growing up in Madison, Wisconsin, and
Right.
the Madison Scouts wouldn't let me in,
Oh yeah.
so I had to yeah, stuck with the
Those are
youth
the
symphony.
rules, I guess.
Yeah, they were crappy rules, so I'm glad they've changed those.
Yeah. Yeah.
um yeah, but I had some really neat experiences, and I probably decided in early high school that I was going to stick with it.
Yeah. Um, and then where did you go? I mean, you obviously end up studying music. Where'd you go from there?
Right, went to Northern Illinois University,
Okay.
and then I studied with Robert Chappell and Rich Holly for percussion, and Al O'Connor and Cliff Alexis were at the steel band, and I learned a lot from them,
Right.
um, along with some other world percussion via the ethnomusicologist, who is Kwang Ho Hong. And then I went to Florida State, and at the time that was Gary Werdesheim, who's a
Okay.
Saul Goodman student,
Right.
and then eventually Arizona State with Mark Sunkett and J.B. Smith.
Yeah. And that was, I mean, maybe we'll talk a little bit about it later, but I know, I mean, you have a large interest in steel pan. And so knowing now that makes sense, like studying
Right.
with Cliff Alexis and going to school there. So that's something I think that we can dig into a little bit. Um, and then you end up back in Wisconsin,
Yeah,
obviously. Like how does that, like, kind of moving all over the country, from one corner of the country to the next, like, and then coming back, how did that transpire?
that was a crazy fluke. I teach at the International Music Camp. I have been for 15 years, and I created a world percussion session up there, so you can go
Okay.
and study with Jamie Ryan and myself, and you get to work at least in 4 culture areas during the week. And then Allison Shaw at UW Oshkosh said, "Hey, will you come do that here at the university?" And long story short, I ended up coming here and working at Oshkosh for a while.
Okay.
And then UW Green Bay opened up a job that was basically tailored to my husband, Bill Salick.
Right.
And he applied and got that job. So that's why we're still here, so that we can be draped in green and gold everywhere. Bill works in the home of the Packers, and they don't let you forget it.
So he's a Packers fan, I take. Was he
The
before?
official answer is yes.
Yeah, he has to be, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that question was on my list too, and we like of Bill, like how did you guys meet? Because I think that's pretty, I don't know, maybe it's more common than I realize, but you're one of kind of few couples that I know that are both percussionists and teaching and teaching in the same state.
Right.
And we've kind of talked about it before
Yeah.
off mic.
Yeah.
But yeah, can you kind of share how you guys met, and then go ahead,
Yes.
feel free to dish some dirt on Bill, you know, whatever,
Ooh.
if he's within earshot or not, I don't know, but like,
Um,
yeah, talk about Bill.
okay, so my husband was the first person I met when I went to audition at Arizona State University for my doctorate.
Okay.
And he was a nice guy, and that's about all I thought. He was very busy, so he was running around, but he was very nice, and introduced me to the department, and I met a couple other grad students, and that was that. And then the next year I ended up sharing an office with him.
Okay.
And we had a very strict dividing line on the floor because Bill has a very unique system of organization. That's all I'll say.
That sounds very politically correct, actually.
Yes, he would own up to that.
Yeah.
And people would come just to look at the office, actually. So yeah, the whole year we got to know each other, and I thought the whole year, oh my gosh, there's no way I could date this guy.
Yeah.
And the whole year he thought, ugh, there's no way I could date her. And I'm not quite sure what happened. Something happened in April or May, and we started dating. And then he went to Kent State. He got a job there, and I kept going with school. If he had stayed, we probably would have been sick of each other and never would have stuck together.
The time apart brought you closer together, maybe.
Right, exactly.
Is that how it works? I don't know. I think.
Well, I think that I don't know about other folks, but I think that I am probably very hard to live with during graduate school.
Yeah, sure.
So, it worked really well for me to work hard and then only see him on vacation.
Right. Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I've always kind of found it interesting that you two found each other, and then your kind of career paths just took you to the same location, or it's kind of worked out for you.
Yeah, it's luck. We never thought it would work, and we're still trying to figure it out. I unfortunately, we both want kind of the same job, but we do different things.
Right.
So we had to talk about, well, what could that look like, and what kind of place could we live in?
Right.
We know that it's sort of a what the holy grail of, a lot of couples don't get to do this. So we've been apart a few times. I mean, we've been together since 2008, but we've spent at least 4 or 5 years apart.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. How'd that work out? Like where and how?
Well, let's see. He was in Kent, and I was in Iowa for 3 years. And then I was in Wisconsin for a year, and he was in Ohio.
Yeah.
And then the last time we were separated, I was in Trinidad for a semester, and he was in Wisconsin.
Yeah. And you were married through this whole time too?
We were married the last time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Because I think that's part of, like this career and being in education, especially higher education, like
right.
it's you have to be willing to go where the job is, or be
Right.
sort of flexible like that. So
Yeah.
so you paid your dues, I guess, is what I'm hearing. So maybe it didn't work out immediately, but it's worked out now. So you put your time in.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's kind of like, now can we be together? But
Right.
yeah, it's, there are times when things have come up and it's kind of like, oh yeah, you've got to do that. And so when I had an opportunity to teach in Trinidad for a semester, Janine Remy teaches at the University of West Indies down there, and she needed somebody to teach for her while she went on sabbatical. It's a very specific thing at a very specific place, and I've been there already, and I knew I could step in and do it, at least adequately.
Right.
And so I could imagine how I could do it, and it's very difficult for her to take a sabbatical for that reason. So it was like, oh, of course, Um, so maybe if more of those opportunities come up, we'll still separate here and there.
Right.
But
Um, so I guess the only other thought about you and Bill, like, yeah, like my wife is not in music, but she's in the arts. She's a graphic designer
that's right.
and works, for a corporation based in West Michigan here.
Yeah.
But definitely like the creative side, and so we are able to kind of share thoughts and ideas, that because I'm in basically marketing and sales for Black Swamp Percussion, and
Yeah.
and for several years, she was kind of designing, ads or web stuff for us and things like that, and or catalogs, and I kind of gradually, start doing a little bit more of that on my end, and she's working, full time anyways. So we're able to kind of bounce ideas off each other and share marketing ideas and share
Phenomenal.
kind of things like that. Like I think like you and Bill can probably do. Maybe it gets tired. Maybe you get home and you're like, I don't want to talk about this stuff anymore. But you're sort of in a position where you can maybe bounce some of these ideas off each other. Like I'm sure you could with any partner in any type of field, but I don't know. Maybe there's a little bit more connection to it.
Yeah, I think it's probably what you've discovered. I think it's wonderful, and I know there are other people who feel there's no way they could, other musicians who feel there's no way they could be with another creative,
Right.
and I totally get that. Especially if they have children. We don't have children, and so we can geek out, for hours watching the same videos,
Yeah.
or not. But I mean, for example, if I do a recording of something, he's half of his job is the audio production design and degree up at Green Bay, and
Sure.
uh, the system that I couldn't make work for our podcast is all set up here in this room.
Right.
But he helps with my podcast. He helped me originally set that up, and then every time I finish an episode, he gives it the bill approval. He listens to
Right.
my levels, and
Yeah.
all of that is very nice, because then I don't have to explain um, why I'm working on a Saturday or a Sunday. Um, I used to be married to a trumpet player who didn't understand even why I had to leave so early for a gig,
Oh yeah.
and the kind of sound, to even the budget part of it too was difficult, but it works well for us. I think that sometimes we do have to say, I think we need to take a break,
Yeah. Sure.
but
Yeah.
it
Well, I
works
think,
well.
yeah, I mean, I think that's true of any relationship. Like
Right.
even, yeah, I mean, we tried to create what we call the COVID room, like at the beginning of the
Yeah.
pandemic, like where people could like go when they're tired of being with the rest of the family, or yesterday at one point, my girls weren't being, they were just having fun and
Yeah.
with each other, which which is great because it's not always like that. But I was like, can you girls have fun somewhere else? Like, can you guys? I just need to like a little bit of space and quiet right now. So
Right.
yeah, I think that's true for any relationship. But Um,
Yeah.
so enough about Bill. Um, I guess, sort of I want to talk about your podcast too, but before we get there, I mean, there's like I got a whole list here. So before we get there, um, obviously I mentioned COVID, and that's kind of a topic of conversation the last several months, like how um, our artists and educators have been handling that time.
Yeah.
And you can cut me off, but I would say you're the first person that I've talked to that I know has experienced COVID like firsthand, like
Yeah.
had COVID. And from what I can tell, uh, and very early on, and when you were
Yes.
when you were in Trinidad, so that
Right.
was over a year ago, and before it was actually in the US. So
Right.
do you mind kind of
Sure.
talking about that experience at all, or
Sure. And
okay?
then you can edit out however. um, yeah. I mean, it's for me, it was terrifying, and it really just started as a cold, and then in Trinidad, the folks, it was the end of a semester, right, at a university, so we knew that the flu was going around and a cold was going around, and everybody was just kind of calling the crud the cold.
Right.
You know how when you're trying to power through something, you tend to kind of minimize whatever it is. And so I know one of my colleagues had the flu like
Mm-hmm.
the last week of classes, and you just say, oh, it's, I think it's coming around to me. And but then a friend said, be careful, one of my friend's daughters just died from this last week.
Wow. And
And
this was before COVID was a word.
right. But so here's the deal. Trinidad is in the very southernmost part of the Caribbean. It's right off the coast of Venezuela. It's a huge shipping port.
Sure.
There are projects that are being built by other governments, including China, and it's got one of the top 10 beaches in the world.
Oh.
It's got nature preserves and animals that only exist there, and people come from all over. And so then it's December, which is summer for some parts of the world.
Yeah.
And so I had been there working really hard, and then at Thanksgiving break, Bill, my husband, came down to visit me. So we went to one of the top 10 beaches in the world.
Yeah.
And we went to this bird sanctuary where you get in a boat for 3-4 hours, a little boat that's pushed with a pole.
Yeah.
And we were in a boat with a bunch of people from different parts of the world for 3-4 hours, which also then means Bill could have been exposed and gotten it and
Right.
never known.
Sure.
So there are a lot of unknowns, but what I do know is that about 6 days later, I thought I was getting a bad cold, and the swine flu was going around, and so was another one of the mosquito viruses. And so it was just kind of, okay, you got to give your final exams, and you're going to have to push through, and you can do this. And then every couple days, it just kept getting worse. And then on day 5, I thought I was getting better, and then all of a sudden I had this feeling that, oh, I'm not healthy, I'm not well. And I was supposed to meet, I finally had some free time, and I was supposed to go watch the National Steel Band Orchestra perform, and it's a good thing for them that I got stuck in traffic and I missed their rehearsal.
Yeah.
So I didn't go to that, and then I was driving back home, and that's when I started to really feel icky. And so I got home, and within a couple hours I was having a hard time breathing.
Wow.
And then I went to the faculty or the university health center, and that's when they isolated me, and the doctor there said, you are very sick, we don't know what's going on. ended up at a hospital, and they didn't know what it was, and they put me on a nebulizer. And um, this is the thing that might have saved me. I have a migraine problem, and the hospital there didn't have the right drugs for my migraines,
Oh,
and the nebulizer dried me out and gave me a migraine. So I talked to the doc and I said, my head was splitting open, and I said, I can't stay here. Um, I'm having a hard time breathing, but I also
yeah.
can't do this. And he said, yeah, I actually don't even know the drugs you're talking about. I don't have any of those here.
Yeah.
Some of the hospital where I was very small. So I left and I made it back to my house, and I made it through the night, and then for the next 3 or 4 days are kind of a blur. I was very sick, but after that I couldn't really walk
Yeah.
farther than my refrigerator. I was luckily in a small studio.
Yeah.
I slept sitting up and was delirious and emotional, and it was really tough, and I thought I was going to die. So
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
sorry. I mean, emotional is probably uh like doesn't do the feelings justice, because I can't imagine being uh in another country, and
Right,
especially and in that situation, and being away from your husband, and not, you're not in the US, you're not in your own home,
right,
you're not in a hospital or location that you're familiar with, and the doctors don't know exactly what you're talking about as far as other meds and other
right.
things. Like, I mean, I think it would be horrible enough to like be in that situation in the US, kind of sort of in your own space, but to be that far removed, I think would be really scary. So
Well,
congratulations for
yeah.
for getting through it and being here,
Thank
obviously.
you. Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. That was one thing that told me that what I was going through was weird, was because at first it wasn't even that I was away from home or any of the logical things. It was that I was extremely emotional. I was like the illness. I woke up sobbing.
Mm,
So this is something that some other folks have experienced. One of the days I cried literally for 2 hours.
wow.
I
Yeah.
called my mom and I said, I'm crying." We did a video chat, and she just watched me sob, and I said, "I can't stop crying." And then another day I was really angry, which is, now they say it's because it was a virus that's attacking all of your systems.
Right.
And so that's just how it reacted with me. And then I got to the point where I was actually thinking through, wait, I'm going through all of this alone. And I knew that I was contagious with something. And so I shut myself off. My landlord kept leaving me tea and some food.
Oh,
She was so
yeah,
sweet,
sweet. Yeah.
but she has a tiny little 5-year-old, a tiny little child. And I said, you cannot come in. So she would leave it on the patio, and um, I didn't see anybody for about 10 days.
Mm,
And um, that, so then by the end, then I was emotional for the reasons you're talking about. Then I
right, right.
was just, yeah, I mean,
So when was this in relation to when you would have normally been coming home? Like
it started 2 weeks, uh, through 2 weeks before I came home. So that was the other thing. Then I had to figure out if I was still going to be contagious,
mhm.
if I was going to get on a plane. And my mother is a nurse practitioner, and so
Oh, okay.
she got together with a bunch of her doctors and kind of, okay, if it's swine flu, it's this. If it's SARS, this. So what is? So then everyone that she talked to determined that if it was 14 days or 15 days, that I wouldn't be irresponsible. The other
Right.
thing is that the only way I could get tested for anything um, that the hospital hadn't tested me for was if I could go 45 minutes downtown into the capital city,
Mm.
and I couldn't drive. I
All right.
couldn't even walk to my car. So I thought then, so imagine if I could get there, then I'd have to wait a few days, and then my visa's going to run out.
Mm.
So then I would be there illegally. So,
Hopefully they would make an exception or two in this case.
right. And I did ask a couple friends to sort of check it out, and somebody said, well, you could also go to the embassy and see if they would give you an extension. And I was like, so I'm going to go contagious with whatever this is
Hmm.
and ask for, they'll kick me out before I get in the
Yeah,
door.
right.
So I just really had to um, pack up my stuff while I was sick. And luckily uh, I was able to get my act together to drive to the airport and get on a plane and sleep.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're home.
Thank you.
Over a year ago, I'm
It's
sure.
crazy.
And
Yeah.
what and then yeah, it's also crazy then you get home and it's like I don't know, shut down. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, now you have an idea of probably what was going on at that time, and now the entire world, the country and the entire world is dealing with it. Um,
Yeah.
uh, so which kind of what I've been asking people sometimes is like how then the pandemic or like the shutdown has kind of affected their lives, like specifically trying to get into creativity or like what maybe you've had to adapt to or transition to. And maybe I'll put some words in your mouth right now only because you just released a snare drum solo
Yeah.
on YouTube just this morning.
Yeah.
um and it's called Translation for snare drum,
Yes.
I guess, translations.
Translations.
And from what I could tell is maybe not a response to the pandemic or COVID, but things that were sort of going through your head as far as um, musical ideas or
Yeah.
musical references. So I don't know if you can kind of touch on both of those things, the solo, but
Sure. Sure.
then
Sure.
also how that kind of developed during the shutdown and pandemic and what else might have been going on.
Yeah. I mean, I had taught in the fall. So then in the spring, I had lined up some teaching, but then also some really cool things that I normally wouldn't get to do. So I had a couple residencies lined up, and I mean, it was so remarkable, just like so many people experienced. I was practicing to go play a concerto somewhere, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, boom, gone, done.
Right.
And wait a minute. And so all of that was just done and over, and then summer camps are canceled, and so this was the first summer that my husband and I spent at home
Yeah.
the whole time. This is the first summer since 1996 that I didn't teach summer camp. So some things were huge changes in my life, but it also was really time. I don't compose that much. I haven't composed that much in a few years. And yeah, when I was delirious in my little room in Trinidad, I had all these different rhythms in my head from different um, musics that I've played,
Right.
and they kept running together. And then I kept thinking, oh, you know what? That one's pretty cool going into that one. And so at one point, I pulled a piece of paper from something else and wrote down a whole bunch of different licks that I thought went well together.
Yeah.
So then when
Sorry, this is in Trinidad?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I was thinking it was more like kind of after the fact and you were
Well,
home and
right.
but it's all
Sorry.
no, it stemmed from like literally you're quarantining yourself and can barely walk to the refrigerator, but
Right.
yet you pick up a pencil and start writing down some rhythms and things that are going through your head, sort of
Yeah.
process it.
I mean, it's just, it's the kind of thing where you're on a loop and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just, and otherwise trying to breathe and trying to,
Right.
so I decided I'm going to write them down, and then it would be cool to have another piece that utilizes the snare drum in a non-traditional way, and
Hmm.
we could do it all on a snare drum, and uh, but then I kind of forgot about it, and um, so then when the pandemic happened, I thought, oh, maybe I have the time to do this actually, and that's I, I think that for some creative endeavors, I don't need much time, and but for others, I really need a lot of time,
Sure.
and for composing, I need a lot of extra time to let it sort of marinate, and then to try things out, and then let that marinate, and then to go back, because it's so extra judgy. I'm such a, like
Right.
I'll write it down, and then I really have to literally wait a few days and
Yeah.
then go back and play through it again.
Sure.
So that was something that benefited.
Yeah. No, I can somewhat relate. Um I'm a marinator also, I guess.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I guess I call it I digest things. So
Oh, nice.
like even I when we will have conversations at work and I don't always this is a blessing and a curse, I think. I don't always have a response right away. It's like
Sure.
I got to think about this or I got to think through it. And sometimes I'll actually say that to Jamel, who I work with.
Yeah.
I'll be like, okay, I got to think about this for a bit. And he goes, yeah, yeah, you think about that, Tim. And he kind of walks away like, I'm not just putting it off. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I need to digest it and kind of come up, or even marketing stuff, like kind of, we're building parts of the website or doing more virtual stuff now. And it is like a process. Like I got to kind of start it and then kind of get a bunch of stuff down and then kind of sit
Right.
with it and think about it and look at it. And even today, like I was going to send out like an e-blast to our retail partners that had a bunch of information. And I was like, I'm not quite ready to do, I'm not ready yet. I need another day or two to sit with some of this and figure a couple things out. But, sorry, there's another thought. Like, do you find getting started the hardest part? Like, do you find joy in getting started, or is that kind of a challenge or frustrating for you?
For me, it depends on the project.
Yeah.
So some things, definitely it's hardest to get started.
Yeah.
And for others, I love the getting started part, and then the tough part comes after my initial ideas are um, gone, or say it's a collaboration. So then I'll reach out and say, "Hey, let's do this," and then oh no, well, I just had the idea. I don't know what we should do now.
Right. Hey man, if you got the idea, you gotta be
Yeah,
willing to
right.
do it. That's what I tell sometimes my daughters, or like, guys at work, like, hey, if you're gonna have the idea, you gotta be ready to you just volunteered yourself. So
Man,
yeah.
yeah, right. Um, with the compositions, the pieces, I've written 2 solos this year, and that with those, it's the most fun is the beginning part, and getting started is not hard. Um, it's definitely the middle, when
Oh,
I
I see.
have to make it more of a process, and I have to be more thoughtful about and intentional, and say, okay, well, maybe I have to, if I'm stuck, maybe I have to think about the form, and let's go back to the nuts and bolts, and you know
Yeah.
fall back on technique for a while and see what happens.
Yeah. So the translations,
Hmm.
I know that kind of, I guess, where did that fall then? Like, was that a joy to start working on, or
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it was I had all of that stuff that I wrote down when I was sick, and so then when I picked it back up again, I thought, okay, I'm going to keep that same idea. I'm going to keep all of these ideas here. I'm going to see if I have some more of my favorite rhythms and licks, and I'm not going to order them yet. I'm not going to put them in order. I'm going to try some different combinations, and then I'll see if I want to, choose a form, and then eventually I'll see if I want to order them. Okay, now how can I make it seamless?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I need to stretch some things out. Now I need some material that will go in between. Now I need something original that will link everything. And but yeah, starting that and then starting it over again was really fun.
Yeah. Sorry, I had a question about the solo. I totally just flaked.
That's why I like you so much.
Yeah, I gotta
way.
I gotta make a note that I flaked there, because I'm gonna edit this out in post.
Today's episode is brought to you by wrist grips. What are wrist grips? They're compression wraps for musicians. They are a one-size-fits-all, 100% cotton, virtually indestructible, vegan, and USA-made compression wrap to give you relief from stress injuries, numbing, or wrist pain. The folks at Wrist Grips were kind enough to send Tim and myself a pair of wrist grips to try out for a week. During that time, I wore wrist grips while I was practicing drums and guitar. I wore them while I was recording and performing, and while I was working out. If you find yourself having wrist pain while practicing or playing, you could likely find a lot of benefits from wrist grips as you work to correct your technique and form. The cool part about wrist grips is that they offer a 90-day money-back guarantee if you're not fully satisfied. So hit the link in the description and consider checking out wrist grips for yourself. Wrist grips, compression wraps for musicians. Today's episode is brought to you by Primephonic, the streaming service designed for classical music. Primephonic is here to save classical music for the streaming era. The app features high-res audio, radio on demand, curated playlists, and podcasts with famous artists. Times are tough these days, but Primephonic pays classical musicians in a fair way, paying per second and not per track. This is a huge deal compared to the other services that only pay artists per song. The app features a massive catalog featuring some of our favorites here at the shop, like John Cage, Steve Reich, Evelyn Glennie, and Ivan Trevino. For a limited time, Black Swamp Podcast listeners are getting 2 months free of Primephonic with the exclusive promo code BLACKSWAMP. Visit the link in the show notes, enter the promo code, and you're good to go. Again, that promo code is BLACKSWAMP, all caps and all one word. Primephonic, the streaming service designed for classical music.
Sorry, you were talking about some of the pieces and rhythms. Like,
Yeah.
Can you talk about? I have a couple notes here. Gahu, Sabar, and djembe rhythms.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk about kind of, I don't know, not too specifically what those are, but like
Sure.
why those?
Okay, so the Sabar rhythms are rhythms that are played on Sabar drums in Senegal, and if you play those drums, then you learn kind of two sets of things. You learn rhythms that you'd repeat over and over. You learn ostinatos that you then play in an ensemble for a rhythm that then is danced to. But you also learn what's called a bach. It's like a melody. So drum ensembles will play sounds like songs. They're playing poems, and they're very cool. And so when you see a concert, or if you go to even a party, before the dancing starts, the drum ensemble will do a cool lick. Or even in pop songs today, there will be a little break and you'll hear some kind of cool drum lick. So it's kind of like a fill, but instead it's played on these Sabar drums. And so if you get to do it long enough, then you'll get to have some favorite Sabar bachs or Sabar licks.
Sure.
So once you do it, then they stick in your head for a long time.
Yeah.
The gahu is from Ewe drumming in Ghana, and some of that can stick in your head because you learn that by rote. You learn all of this by rote. So
Sure.
I learned that. The stuff I used in this piece, I learned it in 2016 when I went to Ghana and studied with Bernard Woma and the members of Sakamu dance troupe. So Eddie Green taught me a lot of those rhythms also. And so I used a couple rhythms that the ensemble drums play behind the dance. And I used a couple of the lead drum rhythms that are my favorites. And the lead drum sometimes plays with a stick in a hand, just like sabar. So that's at least 2 sounds. Both of those drums you play on the side, which would be another sound. Both of those drums often you play with a muted head and then a flat stick. So all of these drums, you need different sounds. And so I was thinking, there's so similar, so many similarities. It'd be cool to figure out how that could work on a snare drum.
Mm-hmm.
And on gahu, there are a lot of sections. And so if you've ever learned how to play that dance, you end up kind of picking your favorites. So like Bill and I are like, oh, I like this one. And Bill's like, no, that one's my favorite. And he's wrong, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. Now the dirt's coming out. Finally, it took 40 minutes, but we got there.
And then the djembe is kind of the same thing, except for the djembe rhythms that I stole. One of the djembe rhythms that I stole, I really ended up just, that one's not literal. That one I morphed out and kind of spun around and combined with a sabar rhythm. And that is an accompaniment rhythm that you play during a dance. Another thing I just took literally for one measure, which is the djembe call that starts the whole, a lot of the dances that are in duple, a lot of rhythms that are in duple, a djembe will start, the lead djembe will start the whole ensemble. And I took that rhythm. So a lot of djembe players might recognize that rhythm. And then a lot of djembe ensembles in Guinea or near that, the more modern Malinka styles will, or traditions will use 3 bass drums. And so there are 2 rhythms that the bass drums play that also figure into it.
Sure.
And all of the djembe stuff that I took is from a rhythm called kasa, which originally helped with a harvest, but it's a duple rhythm and it's very funky. So
yeah. I mean, is this kind of just the first of a couple or a few? Like, it seems like there's a lot of content you could kind of draw from there. Like,
yeah, I don't want to use too much of anybody's specific material, and some of the sabar stuff is actually written or the property of certain well-known groups.
Yeah.
And I mean, the answer is yes. I just have to make sure that I don't steal,
Yeah.
Well, and that I do it respectfully.
Yeah,
so.
That's what I was going to say. Respectfully, or kind of honor the source,
Right.
Which is very important, and I appreciate that. It just seems like an obvious interest, and then a lot of content, and then kind of direction you could go. So stepping back a little bit, there's a term used, rote learning,
right,
in reference to African drumming, or like kind of global music, but then also we talked just briefly earlier about pan, like steel drum stuff, like, which is obviously how pieces, like entire pieces, are learned in Trinidad by rote. Like, I mean, I'm just kind of drawing a line there between those two
Right?
interests, but do you
Yeah.
think, is there more there? Like, does that kind of concept carry over to any other kind of aspects of your playing or teaching or learning in any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was in my undergrad, um, would hear from the teachers, the culture bearers like Cliff Alexis, about how we were, you folks are all just so dependent on music and on the
Yeah.
page, and you won't really know what it's like until you can do it by ear, and
Hmm.
or you won't really know the true experience. And I have so many experiences that where I had to get off the page. I went to Trinidad with the Northern Illinois University Steel Band as an alum, when they played in the 2000 World Steel Band Festival.
Mm.
And some folks there were saying, this band is cheating, they're using music.
Oh, yeah.
But then they heard us play our calypso and they heard that we didn't groove.
They're like, we don't care anymore. Go ahead, keep reading music.
Exactly.
Here's some more music.
Right. So they were focusing on fixing notes or adding notes the last week before the finals,
Mm-hmm.
and we were focusing on dropping our music, and just playing for hours and grooving and learning the groove,
Mm-hmm.
getting off of the page. And just like they had said, it wasn't until I went to Trinidad and learned a tune by ear, and the more music I've learned by ear, the more I've learned about myself. And depending on the music, it is different. Musics are taught different ways. It's not all taught the same,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely without notation. So I absolutely believe that everyone benefits learning music without notation.
Mm-hmm.
A combination is best. And in Trinidad, you'll see that now. Some arrangers for some competitions will write down their music and they'll give it to people who want it. Otherwise, they'll teach it by rote, or they'll have a teacher to teach it by rote, and then they'll offer it, and they'll have different solutions for different people. And it's not like you don't speak about anything. You still have to come up with names for things. And in Trinidad, for pitches, you still use A, B, C,
Sure.
C sharp, D sharp. But yeah, the students that I've taught, the more music by ear that they learn, ensemble directors every time always come back and say, oh, wow, there's a difference,
Mm.
and these students listen more. They are better ensemble players. Oh, and they watch more and they understand the music better.
Sure.
And I believe that every time I've learned a new kind of music or learned in a different way, it's helped me in the other kinds of music. So it's just like instruments, how instruments work for percussionists. If you play
Sure.
drum set, you're a better marimba player.
Yeah. Oh, well, I guess I need to play more drum set because I was a horrible marimba player. No. Well, I just think of, like, when I first was thinking about rote and writing stuff down
Yeah.
and learning it that way. Like, I have been, I mean, most of what I play now is drum set. And before that, I was, like, Bill and I are both University of Akron graduates, alum. So
Right.
he and I both played a lot of pan.
Right.
And so, that carried over into my professional career. Like, just doing a lot of steel pan gigs around West Michigan and stuff, like,
Right.
which I don't do, well, because of the pandemic, but even before that, I'd kind of backed away from it. So I was playing a lot more drum set. And in the new year, I was like, oh, I'm going to learn some linear fills now. Like, I'm going to be
Nice.
the next Dave Weckl, not. But so I was like, okay, but I got to write this stuff down, because I was watching YouTube videos and people were
Right.
just kind of playing it. And a lot of people would have notation, but other times it's like, you know, it's this sticking and then it's this pattern. And I was like, I got to write this stuff down. I'm like,
Yep.
well, now I'm thinking maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just be like trying to listen to it and play it back and learn little chunks and put it together. Maybe that will sort of influence, like you were saying, groove. You know, you guys were reading music but you weren't grooving, like
Right.
maybe that influences like how I'm playing something or how I'm approaching playing or how it feels. I don't know.
I mean, it really helps though if you have somebody there, I think, in person. I mean, I think if you can learn by ear with video, as long as you can watch it as many times. I mean, that's the thing with rote, right? It
Yeah.
takes more time up front. But if you can keep playing that video back, then you can watch it as many times as you want. But
Right.
it's extra great to have a real live person right there doing it, and
Yeah.
then you can try it and then you can play it with them, which is another thing that actually great headphones have given us now, that we can play with videos. We didn't used to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's it is a different thing. And then again, if you're trying to learn something, just to grasp it, to the very beginning of it, there's no shame in doing what you need to do to learn it. You know, it's like the first time I went to Trinidad to learn to play pan, I was like, okay, well, I know I'm in the pan yard and they're calling out notes or they're coming by and playing a lick, and that's great, but I am going to record it, and then I'm going to go back to my room and write it down, just because that's what I need to do. And I did that for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and that was helping me digest it
Oh yeah, for sure.
and internalize it. And then I eventually got away from that, but I decided the point is that I got to learn it, and so I'll do what I need to do
Mhm.
to get it at first, because
Yeah.
you know, let's face it, I am tied to the page, and then maybe eventually I don't have to.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting. What the only other thought I have also about rote learning is like sort of cataloging works. Do you think there was a time, I mean, ultimately panorama
yeah,
pieces or whatever have to
yep,
be written down for posterity? Like
right.
who does that, or where in the process of, you know, when Ray Holman's composing a piece, or like, is he's writing it down and then, or has written it down and then kind of passes that along, or how is this transcribed at some point?
Well, so you're talking about these huge pieces that are written for this competition every year. And the thing is that these pieces in Trinidad are written for a very specific purpose,
Mm.
and they're written
To win.
to win. They're written for a live performance, to
Oh, I
get a
see. Yeah.
crowd up, right? They're not written for you to be, you know, sipping your whiskey too late at night
Right.
with your headphones on,
Yeah.
you know, in your library with your smoking jacket on.
Right.
They are every time you play a round, a prelim round or a semifinal, the band and the composer or arranger is looking at the crowd, and they're paying attention to what the crowd responds to. So these pieces go through a whole bunch of transformations, and you end up with something that is all about excitement and building excitement to the end.
Sure.
So I know about some composers who, at least for a while, were saying, this is something of the moment and it shouldn't be written down. It is an amazing work of art, but it's ephemeral, and that's the way it should stay. And or we have a recording of it, and that's what matters.
Yeah.
But there eventually was a project to write things down and that in Trinidad, and so a lot of trusted people went back and did it. It's part of a really wonderful collaboration funded by a couple people, but Mark Loquan funded a big project, the literacy project. So now there's an archive of a bunch of tunes, and people are still doing it. So it also made a couple composers nervous for a few years. You know,
Sure.
are you gonna steal my music? Plus, there were a few people who did want to print it, publish it, and sell it. But now you can go to the University of West Indies, you can go to the library, and you can see all of these scores from Ray Holman and Jit Samaru, and
Yeah.
it's super duper cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like the history
Yes.
is incredible.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, that was totally bunny trail there that I wasn't expecting to go down, but that's awesome. So let's talk about something completely different now, which is one thing that you've been involved in for several years with Progressive Art Society, which is the PAS Diversity Alliance.
Right.
Okay, well, just talk about that, Elizabeth. Like,
Yeah, sure.
like, how did you specifically get involved, become the chair, and then kind of what are the? I mean, I think the efforts are obvious, but can you just talk about
Sure.
some of the efforts?
The Diversity Alliance came about originally after some conversations between people, especially between Dr. Heather Sloan and Julie Hill, who was on the executive committee. And Heather Sloan was on Julie Hill actually was on the World Committee of PAS, and I was on the World Committee of PAS. And the World Committee especially is something, it is a place where people, full of people who are from outside the US or people who travel outside the US, and perhaps more than some other committees, were seeing issues or confronting issues of discrimination that other committees weren't confronting as directly. I know some committees at PAS do all the time confront those issues, or they have their own way of dealing with them. But the World Committee we were asking each other for help and looking for some advice. So, for example, we had a session in, I think 2014, about fieldwork and gender, because there by then was a lot of information about, if you're an American and you want to say go to West Africa, what are some good tips and what are some things you can do to be safe and be respectful, and all manner of things. But what if you're a woman, and what are some extra things to take care of, or extra things to consider? And I could go on and on, but in any case, there were a whole bunch of things that some of us kept saying, you know what, boy, it would be nice to also talk about this. And there are other people that are being left out of the conversation, and there are other people that aren't being listened to. And so Julie and Heather were talking further, and they decided they wanted to do something more formally. Julie by then was president-elect of PAS, and then she was president. When she was president, she said, let's have a meeting for, I think the first thing was for something like female professionals, or it was called University Women. And it was just something that was put on the books. And I think that originally the schedulers were like, why do we need this? And, you know, can we just have this? And the room filled. It was one of those big, long meeting rooms, and it filled up with women, especially young girls. And the thing is that some of us had been stopped in the hall at PASIC for years by younger students asking for advice, women asking for advice on a whole bunch of different topics, but often on things that were going on at their schools that were really rough,
Mm-hmm.
or going on in their drum lines, or um, uh, some problems. And some of it we thought people just aren't aware, maybe, and some of it was actually some pretty uh, unpleasant things of sexual harassment and
Right.
assault. So we had this big meeting, and everybody was very uh, relieved. And then Julie ended up just saying, we need to simply have a organization within Percussive Arts Society that helps make everyone feel included. There are a lot of people that feel excluded, and our numbers, I think, had gone down over the years of certain populations, marginalized people who had stopped coming to PASIC, and we need to change that.
Mm-hmm.
So the Diversity Alliance, the charge of the Diversity Alliance is to help increase, it's to serve the members of the Percussive Arts Society, and it's to also just hopefully perhaps serve the community also, but help increase inclusivity within the society,
Mm-hmm.
to help us all help each other, uh, and figure out how we can do that. So we educate, we bring awareness. Um, a lot of it is just making resources available.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last part, like resources available, is kind of the first question as I had as you were talking, because I think it would be, I mean, of course, me as a white guy, of course, I would say this, but it would be really difficult to have somebody, a younger student or whoever, come up to me and say, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. I've had issues with this in my drumline, or I'm facing these kind of barriers," and then, you know, to be like, okay, how can I help you? It's
Right.
like that would be number one. Like, okay, I want to help you, but I don't necessarily know how to do that. Like, I'm sure that was an initial kind of struggle when you start having these conversations. Like, so
Right.
then developing the resources, or the kind of the language, I guess, or like the kind of application of it. Like,
Right.
how can I help? So those are things you've developed, obviously, over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that we're working on, and we're going to keep working on. And I mean, it's not that half of half of drummers in the world, or most of the teachers are jerks.
Yeah, right.
It's that some folks were not aware that other people were feeling left out, or other people were even struggling
Hmm.
in large ways. And then if they did find out, or when they found out, they didn't know how to help,
Right.
like you said. So um, we're learning too, and all of us have different experiences. So the Diversity Alliance is made up of a whole bunch of different members of PAS. So we're trying to help. We talk a lot, and we're trying to help each other, and we get feedback from everybody else too. Like, what are folks looking for?
Mhm.
And sometimes somebody just sends an email to PAS, hey, I really need this kind of thing. Sometimes it's generated from within the Diversity Alliance. It'd be great if we could create this resource. Um, Sometimes it's from an executive committee member. Can we have this, or can you create this kind of thing? And sometimes it's of the moment. So, over the last few years, there's been a push to increase programming of music on concerts
Mhm.
from non-cis male hetero white
Right.
composers.
Right.
But then people didn't know where to look. The ways they were used to finding out about music um, weren't helpful in that way. And
Mhm.
so we said, well, let's let's make it really easy. And so let's help with that. There are there's some wonderful diversity databases, but people for some reason don't know about them. Let's put them all together.
Yeah.
So things like that. And there will be some amazing presentations on that actual thing this next PASIC, hopefully.
Yeah, great.
So.
And kind of watching it the last couple of years, definitely the programs and has taken shape and grown. So I don't know, it's exciting, and congratulations again on
Thanks.
like being able to kind of be on the ground level of that and kind of see it evolve. Like how, I mean, this is kind of an open question, I guess, but I mean, is there ways that you've seen it specifically kind of evolve, or it's just kind of like many things organically kind of take shape over a couple of years?
Heather and Julie had to come up with a vision of what this would be. This is a separate ad hoc. It does function as a committee in that it is an organization of volunteers within the Percussive Art Society that serves members, but it's not geared towards a style or towards an instrument, of enthusiasts to find out more about that thing. And it doesn't work to perform duties for the organization in the way that other committees do. And this is an advocacy organization, so the Diversity Alliance is. So they had to really figure out how it would fit within the organization, and they had to figure out a lot of infrastructure things, and they really took care of a lot of that. I didn't become the chair until last January.
Okay.
And by then they already had a lot of things set. I've helped this last year with more formalization and some literal bylaws and nitty gritty boring stuff, but also we've
I'm not interested in any of that
stuff.
No,
but we've gradually expanded our structure and our what subcommittees we have, and how projects actually move through, who gets to work on them and the process for them, and how they generate, and then how we work within our own community. So like when somebody comes up with a really cool idea, then what happens? And literally, how do we share information? We all have to have a Google account. Okay.
Right.
And, there's a lot of nitty gritty, but then also for some of us, it's trying to find a nice balance between not bothering the office too much, and also trying to do the advocacy work that we want to do. PAS is a huge organization only in membership, and a lot of times people confuse the membership reach with monetary reach.
Yeah, sure.
And or they even think of the Percussive Art Society as like this big building somewhere with all this power, and it's just really a relatively small nonprofit arts organization that also has an amazing museum. And every time we want to do something, even just simply put a resource on the web, we need somebody who's paid, a staff member, to take some time out of their day to help us do that.
Well, no, that's an amazing point, and one that I sometimes share with people also is, and maybe I shot myself in the foot years ago when I said I want Black Swamp to appear like much larger than it is. I want because we are obviously we're a small business. We're in the same position. There's a handful of us that work here that are doing, my business card, it says sales and marketing, VP sales and marketing, but I handle artists and educator relations. Nathan does shipping and receiving, but then 100% of the social media work, and then
Wow.
is editing videos and doing other stuff. Jamel is VP of operations, so he's handling everything that goes on behind the manufacturing door.
Amazing.
And then we got two other production guys, and we're still not all full time right now either. So
Wow.
because of the pandemic, so
Right.
it's like sometimes I totally agree. That's a conversation I'll have either at PASIC with people, or when they call up, sometimes we'll do little tours, and they're like, wow, there's only a handful of you guys here. I'm like, well, yeah, then that's what keeps it interesting, I think. But then also it keeps our plates full. So obviously the exact same thing, like with Percussive Art Society, like, yeah,
Right.
there's a handful of people there doing the work, and then one or maybe two people are doing the web work. So you're like, hey, can you update on this on the website? Like, fortunately, I'm in a position where I'm like, this should be on the website, and I can open up the program and software and make the edit, and boom, I'm done, and kind of move on. So
I mean, can you imagine if you had a couple hundred volunteers
right,
all around the world,
yeah,
and they're like busy bees churning away, and and then they contact you every so often or every week. Hey, we're trying to do this. What are you doing now? We must seem like little goats, or I think of us like chickens. It must feel like we're chickens in a coop running around
trying to herd cats or something. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I appreciate the work you're doing with PAS and the Diversity Alliance specifically. I think I just thank you for doing that. It's the work you're doing is noticed and appreciated. So thanks.
Thank you. That's really nice of you to say.
Yeah, you're welcome. I had that written down. That was the one thing I've been waiting to say this whole time. No. So before we kind of go, I do want to talk about your own podcast.
Yeah.
So you're a guest on the Black Swan podcast, but you have, I'm sorry, Art Lives or Art Lives?
Oh, see, now
is it
that's
both?
the little, yes, it's the little.
Yeah.
I started a podcast 3-ish years ago, 2.5 years ago. And I've been a bit lax on being regular. So now I'm back into being more regular, hopefully every 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, it's
with
hard.
This. It is because, as you know, just the talking to people is the fun part. And then you have to do all of the production and so I wanted to somehow address the issue of when you teach, you can say amazing things that, you think are inspirations to your students, and they just hear wah, 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 wah.
Right.
And when other people say them, then they go, oh, they somehow gets through to them. And so I started the podcast kind of as a pedagogical tool to get people, students, young folks, to hear wonderful wisdom from different artists.
Yeah.
I also realized that, Bill and I realized that when we had conversations with artists of all types, there were a lot of conversations that we thought were fascinating, but also similar conversations. Once you start talking about creativity in general and process, and just doing the work, putting in the time and the hours, and working on your technique, that I thought were really interesting. And then it's also just partly community advocacy, because I don't know about you, but I get asked a lot, well, what do you do during the day? Or
right.
When you get up in the morning after you have breakfast, then what do you do?
I ask myself that a lot. like, what do you do? Like, what did I do today? Like, my wife and I will actually say that, like, what did we do today?
Yeah.
We worked and worked and worked, and we didn't get what we done what we wanted to. But
that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, right. That's another podcast.
Yeah, that's another podcast. Yeah, so I just wanted to start talking to different artists about that, and also um, maybe I thought if some non-artists listened to it, they would see get a look inside an artist's life, and also
Hmm.
maybe um, appreciate it more. I don't know. I just thought if nobody listens, then maybe I'll forget it. But so far, I'm having neat conversations with people, and it's been really fun for me to talk to writers and
Yeah.
sculptors and tons of musicians.
Right. Well, that's what I think is interesting about the podcast is uh you're not just talking to percussionists or musicians, which is what I'm doing, and I don't know if I'd have the guts to be like, tell me about your sculpture. Like I don't know. There is like kind of opening up, like, and having a wider lens, I guess,
Right.
and how all that fits together. But so congratulations on doing that.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
But I don't know. It just seems like maybe you kind of live that life a little bit more. Like you kind of intersect with artists and writers and other musicians more.
I'm trying. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm trying also to. I'm slowly getting the transcripts posted, and that's a slow work also for me. But whenever I do the transcripts, especially for the non-musicians, I that's when I realize how stupid I really am.
uh,
Because the transcripts, you'll have a sculptor say something brilliant, and then I'll say, yeah.
yeah, yeah, cool. Yeah, that's
And
one of my
yeah.
favorite words is cool. Yeah,
Cool.
that's great. Super
Right.
interesting. Like, yes,
Hmm.
you idiot. Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
So thank you for the compliment, but I'm basically stumbling around.
Yeah.
And anybody who is speaking to me is being very generous.
They're being very gracious. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And polite. Well, thank you for being polite to me, I
Oh,
guess, this whole
my
time.
pleasure.
Yeah. So where can people find the podcast then?
They can find it on Stitcher and Apple Podcasts and on my website.
Right.
And it's free in all those places. And my website is elizabethdelamater.com. But it's called Art, looks like Art Lives or Art Lives.
Right. Yeah, interesting. So you did that on purpose.
I did. And my original logo was very boring, but it did have a special color for the eye.
Okay.
And then one of a student that I knew, that I got to know in Honduras, is also a graphic designer. And he just sent me this logo that I now have.
Yeah.
He said, here,
Yeah.
I made this for you.
Is
Um,
I hope you didn't take that as an insult. Like, here.
well,
You need this.
I was very aware that my first
Yeah.
logo was really poor.
Yeah.
So yeah, now it doesn't have the special eye, but who cares?
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, side note, like I mentioned, my wife's a graphic designer, and
Yeah.
I always run the gauntlet when I show her stuff. I'll be like, what do one day that was, I forget what I was working on. Oh, I just like the holiday like card for Black Swamp, like what we put on Facebook or what I sent out in an e-blast. And I was like, hey, what do you think of this? And she emailed me like a little list of notes and like a different font choice and do this. And I was like, okay, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Like I'm just like, I tried a couple things. I'm like, I'm just gonna roll with what I got. It's good enough. Like, I'm happy with it. So thanks though. Like
It's a bunch of
it's
drummers looking at it.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, this is out of my wheelhouse right now. Like, I appreciate it, but next time maybe.
Right.
So
Right.
where else can people find you? You got your website, you got your
Website,
podcast.
podcast. Where else can people find me?
Yeah, well, not your, I
Oh,
don't need your
the
street address.
podcast. Well,
Okay.
yeah. The podcast, yeah, it's on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher and
Right.
my website. And
Facebook, Instagram,
Facebook,
Parlor.
Instagram. No.
Just kidding. Sorry.
Yeah, everything's under my name. Twitter.
Right.
And yeah, that's about where it is these days,
Great.
especially with the pandemic.
Right.
I'm somebody who is underemployed at the moment.
Yeah.
But that lets me get my snare drum pieces finished. So
Yeah. And thanks for using a black swamp drum for that. It's appreciated.
It was
So
perfect.
yeah.
Used my 6.5. It was awesome for it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Great. Thanks for the support and good luck with everything that you got going on now. So
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for talking with me. It was really nice of you.
Yeah. And tell Bill I said hi.
I will.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
This has been a BSP production, recorded and produced out of the Black Swamp Percussion Facilities in Zeeland, Michigan. Audio and production assistance by Nathan Coles. Intro and outro music by Adam Hopper. Music sprinkled throughout the episode featured performances by Elizabeth DeLamater, the Acros Collective, Bernard Woma, and Clive Bradley's arrangement of High Mass performed by the New Tones during a past Panorama competition in Trinidad. Visit the show notes for this episode to find YouTube links to some of this music.